Hi, I'm Adam Moseley, and welcome to my Mixed with Mega session. In this session, I'm going to be using a track by Molly, Arizona called Therapy. I'm going to start this video by sharing some thoughts on my mixing process, and then I'll go track by track to show you the plugins that I used and why I use them, and hopefully also how they work. All of the plugins are available from Plugin Alliance in their mega bundle, and you can also try them out for free in demo mode for 14 days. I guarantee you'll love them. You can use chapter markers to jump through this video, or you can follow me step by step along the process.
I gave those years to you. You played me like a freak, though it's hard to say you love me when you got your mouth full. You got too much on your plate, so you make your escape to a different life, not yours and mine, and you're not mine. I'm not really in your life. I can't really satisfy what you want from a woman. Guess I'm just not your type. I don't even mind. It's better out there for me. Better minds there for me. You better get therapy. I was only for so long, even though I was with you. 'Cause you don't know how to please a woman in all its truth. I defended you to my friends when you never showed up. Made up excuses, but I know they saw through your bullshit. I'm not really in your life. I can't really satisfy what you want from a woman. Guess I'm just not your type. I don't even mind.
Beautiful, still love the song, which is always a good sign. So I want to explain a little bit about my mix process so that all of this is going to make a little bit more sense to you. My first step when I hear a song, whether I'm going to produce it, record it, or mix it, or all of those, is to visualize the song. Where are the instruments going to go in the picture? Who or what should be central? Who's going to get the sides? Where are the high frequencies? And what is the shape and the dimensions that I'm going for? Which instruments are the key players, the central characters? Which ones are going to be central and forward? Which other ones are set back, behind, more decorative? And then which ones are going to embellish the sides? Obviously, to bring something closer, I'm going to use less reverb, and to send something further away, I'm going to put it in reverb, and that reverb may be panned in more central or spread out more wide. There's all these options. There's so many questions. If everything's too close and similar frequencies and instruments are in the same place, then it's going to get a bit jumbled. So much of mixing is deciding who gets what, where are things going to go. And once I listen to the song and I visualize that, I have a mental drawing in my mind of all the shapes and spaces and places where I'm going to put the instruments. And then obviously, how am I going to shape the sound to achieve that picture by using plugins and different forms of EQ, compression, reverbs, and other effects. So first of all, when I'm approaching a mix is organizing the session. I organize the tracks in groups of whether they're drums, if there's guitars, keyboards, bass, lead vocal harmonies. So I organize everything and color code it and get everything exactly where I want it to be. A really important part of the process for me, obviously if I'm recording, is to choose which console I'm going to use if we're going to a studio. And if I'm doing it here at Accidental Studios, then I'm going to choose which mic pre's do I use. And I have a selection of them. When I'm mixing a track that I didn't necessarily record, it's the same process for me. I want to think about, well, if I had recorded this, what kind of console would I have used? In this instance, all of the sounds were lovely. They were very warm and recorded very well. So I didn't need to use a console that was going to add more warmth. My console of choice for this song was going to be the Brainworks console SSL 4000E. The amazing thing with the Plugin Alliance and the Brainworks console strips, the channel strips, is that they are so well modeled on the real analog consoles. So the important thing is, one, to know your plugins, know how they sound, know what they're modeled on, and then choose the right colors, choose the right elements. So my next stage in the process is, once I've got the character of the main console inserted on every channel, I'm just going to set the faders and get a working balance and jump through the mix and just make sure that all the tracks are just kind of sitting the way I need them to sit in the mix. So I'm going to skip through all the tracks and do a rough balance. That's how it used to be back in the day. Set the faders and get it to sit, and then think, so what does this need? Part of my process as well is that I need to listen to every track. I actually have to learn every track and every note. That takes quite a bit of time at the beginning of my session, so that I can know what is in the mix, who should get certain moments. If there's suddenly a beautiful melody line on a keyboard or a harmony line on a lead vocal, I need to be familiar with that so that I can really bring the best out of everything. It would be terrible to have mixed the song and missed things. So let's jump into the session. And the first fader is my master fader. I know some people have the master fader at the end of the mix. For me, that would throw me back to front. As you'll see on the master fader, in the first insert slot, although it's in bypass at the moment, I'll explain why for good reason, but I love the Brainworks, the BX Digital B3. It's an incredible EQ, so powerful. We'll deep dive it a bit later. My first stop is the Shadow Hills Class A mastering compressor. For me, there's nothing like it, although there's a few other really, really good mastering compressors in the Plugin Alliance bundle. For me, this is my go-to. I love what it does to the mix. At first, I was afraid. I was petrified. And then I got to know this, and it became my friend. It looks complicated. At first, it is, just because it gives you so many options. But make it your friend. It's amazing. It will transform your mixes. One of the first stages I'm going to do always is look at the presets and skip through the presets and find something. I'm just going to skip through and just see which one kind of suit my track the best. So as you'll see here, there's lots of other named presets, and yep, they're mine. All different projects. You'll see different names, different artist names, different songs. So every time I use this, I'm gonna save the preset and name it. This was the version that I saved earlier. So one of the first things I'm gonna do is bypass the discrete and just listen to the optical side. With my metering, I'm gonna put one of the BU meters on the optical setting. So I'm seeing what the optical compression is doing. The other channel, the right channel, I'm going to set that to the discrete channel so I can watch the two sides, the two different components, the optical and the discrete, and make sure that they're kind of reacting the same, because I don't want one to be slamming and the other not so much. I want them to be reacting to the same peaks, pretty much the same.
I've been pushed around and I still held you down. You just needed something I couldn't give. No longer will I live in your background, live on my tiptoes, walking on eggshells. Let you put me on the shelf, jump off by every prioritize myself.
So what I find, the way I've set this one up, is that the optical component has a bit more of the body, and the discrete for me introduces a little bit more of a sheen. to the sound. Once I've got that, every track I'm going to mix and EQ and compress is going to feed through this. Moving through the tracks, I arrange the tom fills here because they're the first element of the drums that come in. So often I organize my sounds in the sequence that they come in. But the most important thing to start with, and what I identified, the middle space, the middle of my mix, is going to be kick, snare, although snare will be spread out a little bit. Bass is going to be round, but also widened a touch, but obviously Molly's voice. Kick and Molly's voice are the most central things to get right. And then even the bass is going to shape around the kick and fill out the bottom. And the snare is going to be set behind Molly's voice, and I'm going to fill up some wider space with it. I don't want the snare to be a point that jumps out. So the first kick in the session was the original kick in what I was sent. There was only one kick track, and this was the one.
In your life.
So I wanted the kick just to hit a bit harder. First step was actually, originally it was putting it through the SSL 4000D channel, but in this mode, I wanted to go more what I would normally do if I was recording kick, which is have it go through a Pultec. And the Lindell PEX 500 is absolutely the most amazing version of a Pultec EQP. My standard go-to with the Pultec and with the amazing Lindell Audio emulation of it is to always give a little bit of a bump at 60 Hertz, just a little bit of a boost down here, and then to open up the air, that's a little bit more here at 10K. So that was my decisions here. And let me just show you how that sounds if we start without it. What I really liked in the sound was that there was a little bit of tizziness in the high end on the attack of the kick, which I wanted to accentuate. That's why I boosted up here at 10K, just to bring that air out a little bit, which is often when you're recording a kick drum, that's what you're recording. You're recording the air that the sound is traveling through. So I wanted to have that in this sound. And once I'd crafted that, I actually switched the BX console SSL 4000A. I actually put that after the Lindell PEX 500. It raises the tone a little bit as well. Just by introducing more high frequencies, it gives you the perception of a higher pitch of the kick, while it still keeps its thud from the Lindell PEX 500 before it. So I wanted to have more options on the kick. I felt that, especially in the pre-chorus chorus, which is more of the build of the song, I felt that I wanted to add more weight and a bit more slap on the front of the kick and a bit more air. I'd kind of maxed out what I felt I could do on the original kick without starting to make it sound weird. So instead of trying to mess around so much with the EQ, it was just going to be much better to actually pull in a different kick. So that's what I did, using the SPL drum exchanger, which is just absolutely fantastic to replace drum sounds. I went through my library, I found a sound which is Native Instruments Battery 4. Absolutely love it. There's something for everyone. You'll never leave empty-handed. So I found a sound, used the original kick drum to replace or to trigger a new sound, and then I recorded that new sound onto a separate track, deleted the other track. So I've just got a tidy session, my original kick up here, and then I've got the additional kick that I created. And then it's got the SSL EQ. On this sound, I chose this sound because it had a bit of a kind of beach ball element, that kind of lovely air sound that you get from a beach ball. And that's what I really wanted to add presence to this kick. So you can see that I'm not doing anything else on the EQ, but I am boosting quite a bit at 9.8K. I'm giving it a hefty plus 8.3 dBs. I don't care what the numbers are. I'm not mixing by numbers, I'm mixing by my ears. And any EQ that you do, subtractive or additive, is always going to be based on the sound that you got in the first place, and then how you want to manipulate that sound to get it to mix in the track. So don't worry like, oh, I'm putting this up too much or I'm pulling too much out. For one, it's subjective, and secondly, it all depends on the original sound. That's beautiful. It's giving it so much presence, which means on the original kick, when this comes in as an additional kick drum on the pre-chorus and the chorus, it means I don't have to try and fabricate something from the original kick. I just add another layer. And again, Native Instruments Battery 4, my absolute go-to. So if we blend the two together, let's listen to the original on its own, and then I'll solo the secondary kick to go with the original first one. This is exactly my process when I'm recording a kick drum. I'm going to use maybe two mics inside the drum. One's going to get the knock and the attack from the beater. The other one I'm going to set normally an RE20 for me. And the secondary mic, an AKG D12, I'm going to set that off a bit. I'm going to put my hand around inside the kick drum, find out where most air is moving, and that's what I want to capture. So I'm going to put the D12 a little bit into the air, pointing at the beater, but a little bit off axis. And then the RE20 bang on it for that disco kick, just for that mid-range knock. And that's what I'm kind of doing here as well. I'm creating what I would do if I'd recorded it by adding the sounds that I would have captured if I'd been there in the first place. So the snare is the first track where I actually started to use any reverbs. I felt that the sound was a little bit bright, a little bit harsh. And also, as I mentioned, when I started my visual of the shape of the song, I didn't want the snare to be spiking out and pointing out. I wanted it to be set back. I wanted Molly's voice to be here. I wanted the snare to be behind and a little bit wider in the picture. So that meant I needed to, one, widen the snare, and it was quite an abrupt, tight sound on the snare. So I wanted to take some harshness off and also extend the amount of time that the sound of the snare started. The SSL compressor really tightens your sound and makes them more punchy. The next stage was to introduce a little bit of peak limiting, because I did find there was a little bit of like variation in the snare, some velocity variation, and I wanted to temper that a little bit and just control it a touch. So amazing go-to option, which is the Neold U2A, modeled beautifully. And it just does the job. It keeps a bit of shine on the top. It gently pulls down the peaks, but you don't hear it ducking. You don't hear it sucking anything out. You just hear it controlling. And it brings up the body again in a very, very gentle way. So your sound just gets tighter. It just brings it to life. I love the fact that it gives you some extra options. It gives you recovery time. some aging. It gives you drive to drive it a little bit. And then obviously you've got the mix output between the dry signal and the wet signal. So then I talked about how I wanted to put this in its space in my visual drawing of the song, just set it back, not have it as a point in the middle, widen it and set it behind Molly. I didn't want it too high. I didn't want a lot of low frequency. I just wanted to build a strip for it to go behind the voice being here and the kick coming out the bottom, the bass warming stuff out, and then pretty stuff up here and some pretty stuff to the sides. That was my visual for the mix. So reverbs aren't just adding long, shiny space to things. They can craft the size of the sound of the instrument that you're working with. As I said, I wanted to widen the snare a little bit and sustain the frequencies a little bit, but not into a long decay of like an echo plate. The snare is being sent to bus 2324 and also 2526. We got 2 reverb sends from the snare, at the moment both muted. At the end of my session on my mix window, I've got all of my general effects. Normally I'm going to have at least 6 reverbs. The template I pulled in had 7, but I didn't need the endless reverb, so I made that inactive. Essentially what I did was I thought, wow, this is a bit similar to a song I did 2 years ago. Similar vibe, similar tempo, neo-soul R&B kind of tune. So I thought, you know what? Let me pull that bank of effects in to this session. It will be a great starting point. Everything's routed, everything's set up, it's good to go. And then I can make some changes if I want to. I can jump in and fine-tune the reverbs to suit this song. Obviously, if there's any delays involved, I can deal with those and get them to sit in the tempo of this tune. And something that I tend to do, and this is why it saves me so much time. If you look here, I mentioned on the sends I was sending to the bus 2324 for 1 reverb on the snare, another reverb on the snare going to bus 2526. So how that makes sense and how it works for me is my first reverb, which I know is my delay plate because it says so, is always sent from bus 1718. My next reverb is going to be from bus 1920, and that's going to be my reverse reverb. My next one, 2122 on the bus, is going to be a small ambience. The next one, 2324, is going to be a tight room. 2526, the bus, will always go to a spring reverb, and 2728 is always going to go to a plate. And then I'll have a couple of delays. Bus 3132 is 1 delay. Normally it's a tighter delay. Bus 3334 may be a longer delay. So I'm sending my effects via buses, keeping the original signal, the quality of it and the sound of it that I've managed to craft, keeping that as it is, and then feeding it to any effects that I want. Obviously that may change if I decide I want to put a phaser or put distortion directly on the sound, on the track itself, and if the effect becomes an inherent part of how that sound will be in my mix, then I'm going to keep the plug-in on that track. But in this case with reverbs, pretty much always I want to craft my sound of the instrument or voice and then send it to a reverb up separate returns and then craft the sound of the returns to suit my mix. That way it enables me to maybe reduce the send on a vocal, make it dry and bring the voice forward for maybe a verse or maybe a few words, and then suddenly on the automation on the send it back into 1 or 2 of the reverbs, and I can really play with the perspective of the vocal, bringing it forward by having it dry, and then suddenly setting it back more into the mix or behind the mix with bigger reverbs. It allows me complete control and complete flexibility. So I'm sending the snare, first of all, to a kind of tight room to widen it a little bit. 2324, here's the effect. BX rooms, I chose a kind of room I've made it quite tight in its reverb time. The size isn't too big. I played with some of the parameters. I widened it a little bit because that's what I want to happen. I want the sound of the reverb to go to the sides of the snare. There's a reverb trick. It's called the Abbey Road reverb trick. It bugs me because I was at Trident and we all did the same thing. But often with the reverb, why I like to send them separately from the signal on a bus is so that you can EQ the reverb differently. Most of the effects that we hear, most of the trickery and the fine little clever stuff in the mix happens in the high mids. It's pretty rare that you're going to want to put a reverb on low frequencies. It's never say never. But often if you've got a snare sound and it's got some low frequencies, you want to filter that off the reverb because you don't want to extend those low frequencies across the other space that you're saving for the kick to cut through and for the bass to cut through. So always I'm going to filter my sounds a little bit. So here we are with bus 23, 24 going to the tight room on the snare. Here we go. You see how when the snare is dry, it's very, very close. And that's too much for me because it's a harsh sound. I liked it being bright. I wanted to tame the high end a bit. I tamed the peaks a little bit as well. But I want to set it back and widen it. And that's what this does. And then for the tail afterwards, I'm sending it to bus 25, 26, which is the spring on the third row. And let's listen to this. We'll add this in. And what I did in this to create the feel of the spring was I put a pre-delay and had the pre-delay bounce a little bit inside the reverb to create that ripple effect that a spring reverb has. Let's listen to the snare dry in the mix, and then I'll put some reverbs on it.
In your life, I can really satisfy what you want from a woman. I'm just not your type. I don't even mind. It's better out there for me. Better minds there for me. You better really in your life. I can really satisfy what you want from a woman. Guess I'm just not your type.
Really nice. So really achieved the exact positioning that I wanted to get on the snare there. Very happy with it. So you may have noticed that as well as sending some of these drums or the snare to the reverb, I'm also sending them to bus 1 and 2. Bus 1 and 2 is the drum bus for me. Often I don't want to bus all of the drums completely. Instead of going to my main mix output, I don't want to send them just to the drum bus. Again, I want to have the option of craft the sounds, have them going to the main outputs in my mix, but then also feed a little bit to some side EQ or side compression. In this instance, what I wanted was I put the SSL console just for some coloring. It's not really doing too much in here. I am using the expander a little bit just to open the sound, but the SSL really isn't doing too much here. What I did want here was have an option to fatten the sounds by feeding them in a little bit more. I didn't want to overdo it on the individual tracks, but I wanted the option that I could feed a little bit more low end and also feed a little bit more air to my drum sound without messing up my direct tracks. So what I did, I put the Better Maker. It's just fantastic. Again, it has a lot of those characters like the Pultec. What I wanted to do basically was boost a little bit at 30 Hertz and then also boost the high frequency at 10K, which again, normally on a Pultec, I'm going for 60 Hertz and 10K, But in this instance, because I already had that covered, especially from the Lindell PEX 500, that was taking care of that on my kick. So this is where I just wanted to add a bit more subtone if necessary, and a little bit more highs. And then I could just feed my tracks if I wanted to. The input here, anything I send to bus 1 and 2 is going to go there, and I can feed the kick and just decide how much I send into it. I can even automate the send as well. So some parts of the song will be lighter in the drums. Others I can suddenly automate sending more to get more character coming out of the Better Maker 232D. The claps had a nice sound, but they were kind of lost a little bit. One of the things about hand claps, even though this is a stereo sample, is hand claps, when they sound, what makes them magic, I should say, is that they're never that tight. If everyone doing hand claps together around a microphone was so precise to the millisecond, you'd only hear one loud clap. The beauty of hand claps is that everyone just flams a little bit. Hopefully they're not offbeat, but the little bit of natural flam between the hand claps is what creates the size. I wanted to accentuate that, especially in the bridge, because I wanted to bring the side stick in, and I wanted that to be central and to take the glory of the mix in the middle. So the hand claps I sent to the sides, and I wanted to delay one a little bit to give it a little bit more of a flam. So again, I went to my delay, and what I did just on one side of the claps here, just on the right side, I inserted a slight delay of 15 milliseconds. This is pretty much the Haas effect, which just basically separating a stereo signal, you delay one side by 10 milliseconds, and that actually suddenly is enough to separate the sounds and create much more stereo width. Let's have a listen in solo to see what that does. There was already delays and some reverb on the sample, but you see how that just widens it. It changes the sound a little bit between the two sides, so you notice it more. And then I wanted to add to the reverb because it got lost when it was in the mix. So I sent the bus for the claps, bus 3 and 4 coming into this auxiliary fader. I sent them to the spring reverb again. Let's get to the bass.
To a different life, not yours and mine, and you're not mine. I'm not really in your life. I can't really satisfy.
So the first part of the bass on the separate track 18, as you can see here, is the very melodic bit. This is the first entry of the bass. The second bass, which is the 808 bass that they programmed, is a tighter sound actually. It plays a lot less. It's not moving around so much melodically. This is the first instance of the bass, and I love what it does. When I first heard this, I thought I was listening to classic 1970s Stevie Wonder with those amazing bass synth sounds. I wanted to take it in that direction and go for that kind of Moog sub-synth 37 kind of sound. So I wanted to enhance that and add a bit more sub-harmonic and also make it fatter. So we got a bit of compression, we brought up the front a little bit on the sound, and I gave it a little bit of cut, a little bit more. So we're good with that. Let's look at our next stage. So as I said, I wanted to bring up the subharmonics a little bit and just make it wobble a bit more in a way. Now I tighten the sound, now I could expand it. If I hadn't have tightened some of those lows, it would have been out of control to try and do the sub-synth. And here it is, the BX sub-synth, absolute perfection. It really is. I can't believe how detailed this is, just how many options it gives you. That's what it does. You feel the weight, the size, the subharmonics, the width, a bit of edge, all of it just increased. It sounds like someone's been adding, oscillators or playing with the LFOs or something. Yep, it is possible to overdo things. So again, just go through, find out the different regions. This was at 50. Let's take it out and then we'll introduce it back. Often it's good to really overdo something as long as you don't break your speakers. It's really good to overdo something just so that your ear can hone in on what's happening. And then when you've recognized and identified what the button does and how the sound changes, once you know that, then you can zero it back out and start to feed it back in and decide how much of that element you want to introduce to your sound or remove.
To a different life, not yours and mine, and you're not mine. I'm not really in your life.
Just beautiful how the BX sub-synth fattens, drops it lower, widens it, adds a little bit of drive to it. Amazing. As you've noticed, I'm very much about little strokes to create the painting. Occasionally, if a sound needs it, I will do a big broad move, but I much prefer to little by little just nudge and nurturing the mix into place. I've been a producer for about 45 years, producer, arranger, engineer, mixer. And often on tracks that I'm producing, the artist will say, look, if you hear anything, if you think the song needs anything, just go ahead, try it out. Usually I'm really, fine to do that with drums, sound replacement, adding additional layers and textures and subtle stuff. It's pretty rare that I perform any part on a song, but on this beautiful song, Therapy, I really felt that verse 2 needed a new flavor to come in. The arrangement was already great, but it just needed something different. Often you'll do that on a second verse. Maybe verse 1 will be a bit more minimal, verse 2 you add something. And so that was the case here. And there wasn't much going on in the high frequencies. So I thought, but back in the 70s, 80s with like vintage R&B and funk bands and so on, especially the Ohio players, they always had a string synth really high, which was always very flowy and kind of vibey. So I thought that's what verse 2 needs. It needs a high synth. There's nothing going up there. So again, I called up my friends, the plug-in Native Instruments, and I went for Massive, which is my favorite synth module. It's so easy to navigate. The directory is fantastic. You're always going to find something in there that you can use. So a few quick steps, a few quick keywords. I had a selection of sounds and I went through them and decided that a preset called Warm Synth was the right vibe for me. So you can see on this track, I had Massive. I won't open it now, but I had Massive. I went through that process, found Warm Synth, and played it live. It was one of my first couple of takes. It was very vibey. I was being very careful in my playing. I didn't want to overplay. I'm very self-conscious if I play something melodic on someone else's tune. So I played kind of lazily, a bit laid back, and I really liked the vibe. It really worked. I know that if I had overthought it and done lots of takes, I probably would have got too precise and too exact. But I really like this, and I like the way the velocity was reacting as well. So I recorded that. I recorded the Warm Synth. It's here, it's track 20. And let's look at what we did with it. some of the sound on the synth was a little piercing, a little harsh, but I didn't want to go back and replay it. I was in conscious flow. I just wanted to keep going. I felt it needed that. So I thought, okay, I'll sort it out. This is the sound that I started with. So around there, it starts to get a bit resonant. So I thought, okay, first thing, let's identify those frequencies and let's duck them a little bit. Let's just pull them back. So I swept around on the frequencies. I just set this at like minus kind of 6, moved around on the high frequency to try and find out where is that really resonant thing happening, and decided it was around 9K. So I ducked 9K at minus 5.6 dBs, and then very effective frequency area, of course, 5.1K, always a very harsh kind of resonant frequency anyway. So decided that was a part of the culprit, and I pulled that back quite a lot, pulled it back 10.5 dBs. So this worked as a starting point. Really softening that out quite a bit. So good starting point. Next up, on my plugin extravaganza, was the unfiltered audio zip. This is a really cool plugin. I wanted to use this as a sidechain compressor, so I went through the presets and found one that said sidechain controls filter. I thought that will probably do the job. I did a few different versions and I saved each one. As I've explained, I always save a name as I go along with my presets. So I did the first one, then I thought, let me tweak it a bit more. I did a second one, and then the third version. Each time doing a little bit of work, listen back in the track, come back, fix it a bit more, and save the newer version just in case I decide the previous one was better. And the impulses that it's getting, the triggering, is coming from Molly's vocal, being sent to bus 99, which is the key input to our sidechain compressor. So there we have it. It's got a great visual display as well, so we can see what's happening. Final touch. That was working, but I still felt the sound was a little bit too resonant, a little bit too harsh, a bit too piercing. So this was the perfect time to pull up the Brainworks refinement. This is a harshness controller. It's absolutely magnificent. I've used this on so many things where a sound is just a bit too harsh or too resonant, and you can really gently play and reduce that harshness. Let's see what this does. We'll play the same again. I'm starting at where it starts to get a bit harsher. It really addresses all that harshness, all the resonance, all comes out, and now I can just set a nice high layer behind without it causing any conflict for me. Let's just hear that in the mix.
It's only for so long, even though I was with you. 'Cause you don't know how to please a woman in all its truth. I defended you to my friends when you never showed up. Made up excuses, but I know they saw through your bullshit. I'm not really in your life. I can't really satisfy.
So it's really floaty, it's really nice. It never gets in the way of the lead vocal. but it's always just hanging in the background, and it's set really far back because the delays and the delayed reverb make it very, very dreamy. Perfect position, way behind everything. So the next track is called Arps, but I felt it was like a Fender Rhodes kind of part, playing a slightly arpeggiated piano melody. Let's just listen to the part. I'm going to bypass everything. Back in the day with Fender Rhodes, sometimes you'd have the Fender Rhodes that came with an amp, and it sat on the amp, and the keyboard would plug in, and then you'd mic up the amp. You also had direct outs, but often you would mic up the amp from the Fender Rhodes. If it was, I think it was the suitcase model that didn't come with the amp, then you take the outputs and put it into a guitar amp or a bass amp. That's where I went. The best bit was choosing which amp I was going to use to amplify the sound of what I was now turning into a Fender Rhodes. And I chose the Ampeg B15N, absolutely stunning modeling. I had one of these amps a few years back when I had the Boat Studio in Silver Lake, and what can I say? One of the most beautiful bass amps ever. And again, especially the sound of old R&B or maybe old Motown, that kind of period, just for adding weight and serious depth to your sound. I went through the presets, found out which combination of microphones I wanted, and then just played with the inputs. You've got the 1964 input or the 66. The 66, if I recall, is a little bit more aggressive. So the 64 is warmer, but the 66 has the grit. So let's just see where this sound has gone from where it started.
Really satisfied. What you want from a woman? Guess I'm just not your type. I don't even mind.
Lovely, exactly in the right frequency range that I wanted it, because there's the space for it. My high synth is way up there. The vroomf that I created is happening in a different space, frequency-wise, and actually space in the mix. It's funny, often I'll hear something and I'll just listen to the track and I'll think, oh my God, everything sounds so amazing. I don't even know what I need to do here. But then I start to get into it and I form that vision and the concept of where I want to go and where I want to place things, the dimension, the perspective. And then suddenly I get into conscious flow and I'm on a roll. So also I've got to be careful not to just do stuff for the sake of it, to always make musical choices when I'm implementing the technology that are going to enhance the feeling of the song. That's the essence. What is the feeling of the song? What is the objective of the song emotionally? And how can I expand on what I'm given and take that hopefully to another level of that feeling? So now to Muller's voice. I love Muller's voice. It's exceptional. It's so musical. She really understands her voice as an instrument, the texture, intensity, when to push, tighten up, get a bit more bite, relax, sing a bit more relaxed behind the beat. She really understands the nuance and texture and timbre of an emotional vocal performance.
I gave those years to you. You played me like a free though it's hard to say you love me when you got your mouth full.
Love it. The voice is recorded very, very warm. And I wanted it to have just a little more cut, a little more brightness, presence. So we would pop just a little bit more, pop out a little bit more in the mix. So the BX Opto, absolutely beautiful compressor. It pulls up the body, tightens it, adds a little bit of touch, enhances some presence. Let's see what this did.
I gave those years to you. You played me like a freak, though it's hard to say you love me.
Sounds lovely. The character adds to the voice, and the natural recovery is pretty quick, which is good as well. So you don't actually hear it kicking in. It just smooths the volume out. So next up, I knew that before I started adding breathiness, I had to deal with maybe a little bit of sibilance that I was hearing. So nothing better than the Lindell 902 de-esser. It gives you an incredible visual display, which always helps. So you can actually see what you're doing. You've got the option just to listen to the de-essing processing as well. So you can really fine tune it. The range is going to allow you to increase or reduce how much you're ducking. So if I'm at 8.51 dBs, let's just listen.
I gave those years to you.
So obviously taking the range all the way up is grabbing much too much and it's too abrupt. It suggests a target area, which is normally pretty good, but obviously you can go more. It depends on the sound you're working with.
Me like a freak, though it's hard to say you love me when you got your mouth full. You got too much on your plate. So
nice. It just does what I need to do, tames a little bit of sibilance so that now I can put in a lot of the presence and a lot of cut into the vocal sound. And for that, here's something I really love, the Novel Tech Vocal Enhancer. Just fantastic, really powerful. So here we are. This is what I saved.
I gave those years to you. You played me like a freak, though it's hard to say you love me when you got your mouth full. You got too much on your plate.
Love it. Just adds the brightness, the presence, pulls the vocal forward. And then my final touch was just to use the Acme Opticon XLA3. Just fantastic. Tightens the sound, punches it forward a little bit.
I gave those years to you. You played me like a freak, though it's hard to say you love me when you got your mouth full. You got too much on your plate.
Just lovely, just really brings the vocal forward. So we're nearly there. I did promise at the beginning that I was going to return to the master fader and just show you a couple of other plugins that I used there. So let's just give that a go. And I'll explain why I had them bypassed for doing the whole mix, but why I'm going to bring them in now. As I said at the start, I don't want to have too much processing on my master fader. Typically what I'll do, I'll just have the Shadow Hills Class A mastering compressor on my mix bus, on my master fader, and then I'll use the SPL Hawkeye just to have a visual display of everything that's happening so I can check everything's okay. I will then bounce my mix in real time, listen to it as it goes down, and then what I'll do is open up a brand new clean session. Usually I'll import my mix and then I'll leave it for a few hours or leave it for a day and think, okay, what does this need? What can I bring to it? And then I'll think, do I need to enhance this? Let me experiment. So normally in mastering, you just want to listen to the EQs, maybe excite the sides a bit more and make the center maybe more focused where your kick, maybe your snare, your bass and your lead vocal are. And then a lot of your airy kind of things, backing vocals, breathy vocals. So in my process, what I do now, if I was in mastering, now I'm going to open up a mastering EQ and just see if my mix needs anything. So one of the fantastic things about a lot of plugins is that they give you a solo function, an auto solo and auto listen, where anything that you do, any frequency band or boost that you choose, the minute you click on that button, it goes into solo and you can focus on just the frequencies or the elements that you're playing with. When you let go of it on that dial, beautifully the sound fades back into the mix. I'll show you what I mean. How smooth is that? Stunning. So I can focus on whatever element of the song I need. If I want to bring up a little bit more punch in the mono section in the middle, I can do that by boosting a little bit of around 928. That is so focused, it's insane how good that is. And this is just a beautiful EQ. It's just stunning. Of course, it's not just for mastering. You can use it for anything. And you can work on the mono section, you can work on the stereo section. I love it. It terrified me at first. And then I was determined to get to grips with it. And now I can't do without it, especially on my finished mix. And the final stage, so I've got the BX Digital B3 EQ going into my wonderful Shadow Hills Class A mastering compressor, a little bit of blend on the stereo width. I said there 103% there, just slightly up 3%. On the BX, I will push this a little bit going into the Shadow Hills. So on this, I will use the width and I'll expand that. I'll widen it just 104%. So together, I'm only increasing it 4% and 3%. If we listen to the mix with and without the V3, you'll see how the little bit of width going into the Shadow Hills just enhances the thing more. Just when you thought it couldn't get better, or at least I thought, I have this before the Shadow Hills mastering compressor and just love it. Just love it. You see the shape because I'm only boosting the highs on the sides. On the last band, when I put this in, it just sizzles up to the sides and the highs. Fantastic. And the other thing that I'm going to add, just to round this off, the BX Limiter True Peak. Just fantastic. This is a really, really powerful tool. I highly recommend getting to learn it, getting to know how it works. Try it out. Obviously, there's gain makeup at the end of it. It's also a great display. It can give you different displays for dynamic or for streaming, for European broadcast, US broadcast, Japanese, all different settings so that you can make sure that you're hitting your targets properly. And it will give you fantastic displays of all you need to look at. So let's just have a very quick listen and just see what this adds to the mix.
I'm not really in your life. I can't really satisfy what you want from a woman. Guess I'm just not your type.
I love what it does to the punch. It brings out the kick, it still puts more punch, it tightens the whole mix, it adds more weight to it, and also spreads the dynamics. Who could want for more? Just absolutely fantastic. There is so much power in plugins. The Plugin Alliance collection, the Mega Bundle, is phenomenal. It can do whatever you want, but if you don't know what you want and you don't know what the plugins do, how are you going to achieve it? So again, the essential, learn your plugins, take time, experiment, try different plugins, try different presets, see how the parameters move, try and train your ear to understand what's actually going on. You will reap the benefits, I guarantee. I hope you've enjoyed my mix with Mega session, and I hope you found it useful. Hopefully within all of this, there's some useful tips, also about the process of mixing, the concept, how I go about all of that stuff, and why I make the decisions I do. There's never a one-size-fits-all. You can find more of these sessions from various mixers, producers, and fantastic engineers on the Plugin Alliance website and also on their YouTube channel. I hope you've enjoyed this. Do go ahead, check out the other videos, and I'm sure it will change the way you approach mixing and also how you understand mixing. Thanks, Plugin Alliance, Brainworks, for your fabulous plugins.